G'day, I'm Rob.
And I'm Dave.
And you're listening to the Doctor Who Show's Hot Take on the latest episode of the series, The Story and the Engine by Inua Ellams. Now, Dave, this is a super hot take. We both put on the episode at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and we're convening here just before 6 p.m, so we've had, 5 minutes in between the episode ending and now to get our thoughts together.
Yeah, look, we really have, and it's worth emphasising at this halfway point of the season, Rob, that when we say hot take, we mean that. We walk in with a few notes we've sort of scribbled down as we've watched this. We haven't had time to process it. We haven't had time to look up our references. No. So everything we pull across in this conversation is really just plucked out of thin air, and it's not always as well researched or as well thought out as hopefully, our other products are. But that's the nature of hot take. And as we say, one way or another, we will do a cold take on this whole season at the wrap-up.
Yeah, that's the whole point. You get our hot takes and then you get our cold take. And hopefully, somewhere in between, we find the truth.
Yes, hopefully. Oh, and shout out to all those wonderful podcasts out there that have given us shout-outs as well. Pull to Open have, I'll explain later have. It's really fun to hear
Big Blue
people
Box
referencing what we've said. Oh, there you go. Yep, another one. So, yeah, that's always really fun to hear us referenced on other podcasts we're listening to.
Splendid chaps, all of them. Do you have a word of the week, Dave?
My word of the week is theatre.
Theatre. My word of the week is ghost.
Ghost. I've written that down.
Okay. I'll kick off by saying this has got to be the terror of doing a hot take, because we're just talking about that a moment ago and I want to continue down that path for a little while, because unlike someone who's had a preview screener in hand for some time, or who can watch this in days ahead and watch interviews about it, whatever Confidential is now called in the UK, or listen to other people's thoughts on other podcasts, we've got nothing. We fly by the seat of our pants, and while that's usually exciting, tonight it's actually pretty terrifying because my thoughts are all over the shop.
Yeah, it's funny, Rob. I wrote down a few perhaps slightly glib lines that I could use when you asked me the question, what do you think of this? And as the episode went on, I thought, they're quite funny lines, I hope, but are they particularly fair? So I was ready to give you the retort, when you said, what did you think of this, Dave? To go, well, I'm a bit shocked that after a Dr. Light episode, we've gone with a plot light episode. I don't resile from that totally, but I also think that being that glib and that simple with this episode is completely unfair.
Yeah, it is. And I'll just park that for a moment and say another light thing I thought we almost were going to have was a companion light episode. Because for the first, I don't know whether it was the first half or what it was.
22 minutes, Rob, because I've got the same note.
About Belinda being in the TARDIS?
Yes.
Yes. I thought, oh my God, it's companion light.
Yes, no, I had the same thought. I'd written down here, Belinda, question mark, then a couple of other notes, and then, yes, I did make a note that it was 22 minutes before she actually entered the story. Now, I don't know whether that was a deliberate creative decision, because they understandably wanted the Doctor to go through that solo journey of exploring the barbershop himself and learning a bit before Belinda came in. I don't know whether that's because we have another symptom of Verada Sithu's character having been added at the last moment, potentially. So this is sort of her equivalent of Jamie being unconscious in the moon base, so just rounding about the Piper every couple of scenes so we know he's still there. I think that either of those explanations are valid but a shame, and I do think that what would have perhaps made this episode better than it was, which is not to say that it was bad, but better than it was, would have been some sort of B story with Verada or Belinda, I should say, in it, that then could connect up with the Doctor's A plot. I think that having one plot, the companion is not in for half the story, does make this feel, I'm going to say, more insubstantial than it deserves to feel.
And there was even scope for that, because you're making me think, when she does come out of the TARDIS, she knocks something over in the street market, and a guy's like, oh, you've got to pay for that, or you've got to pick that up, lady, or something. There could have been a whole, I don't know, she has to work off her debt because she broke something on a stall, or she gets chased through the marketplace, or something happens to her outside. She just doesn't walk into the barbershop and like, oh, I'm here now. And he's like, oh, you're here now. Okay.
Yeah. Even, and I know this is the first time I'm going to reference the mind robber in this conversation, Rob, but even you think of part one of the mind robber, you have the companions out there exploring things that are going on, the Doctor dealing with another aspect of it, and then they all sort of work out they're all in trouble and link up. I think, yeah, either of those options would have worked well. It was nice to see that cutaway scene of Belinda doing nurse jobs, and that was really lovely. But yeah, I mean, I joked about a plotlight episode coming after a Doctor Light episode, but a monoplot episode with only half a companion coming after a Doctor Light is a very interesting story, and I wonder whether that is for very hard practical logistical reasons, or it was a creative decision or an accident.
Yeah, we've said this, and I know other podcasts have said this about other episodes. In a 13-part season, this might have just fitted in as just a sort of a filler episode, but for it to be one of 8 episodes, 7 if you don't count the Dr. Light one last week, I just expected it to be doing a bit more. I don't know where else I can take that thought, but it's just here in my scribbled notes. And again, folks, this is the sheer terror of doing a hot take.
Yeah, so maybe we should use that to sort of go back a step and talk about what we did think of this one. Because, look, as I said, I made the glib joke about this being a plotlight story, and it was a story that, in terms of, if you were doing the Wikipedia summary of this, it would be a very linear, very straightforward story. It's very much basically one set, or a couple of little side versions, but basically it's a four-hander in one set. I thought there were some incredibly interesting ideas in this. I thought there were some very good performances in this. I thought there was some mixed direction in this. Overall, I thought it was fine, but again, when I say, I was about to say I think it was fine but insubstantial, but I do think that the word insubstantial is unfair to the concepts and ideas that deserve recognition in this. So I'm not quite sure what word to use in place of that. And Rob, I echo what you say about the danger of a hot take. I haven't had a day to sit there and go, how do I sum up the dichotomy of, or the duality of, a very simplistic plot, but not a shallow plot.
Yeah, or even just sit there with, once someone fills in a Wikipedia entry or some sort of wiki entry, just to sit there and read through their summary and go, oh, so that related to that, and that's why that happened. Because here, on the face of things, we've got this human, the Barber, and he's going to destroy the gods. But surely someone who understands stories so well would know how intrinsically linked the gods are to stories and the human race. I could sort of see that getting answered, but it wasn't quite being answered. And why were we on the back of the giant spider? I mean, shout out to Mike Solko for mentioning the Anansi story a couple of months ago in our main show. Well done, Mike. I was just thinking, at different times in this, what is going on now? Why does he want to do this now? Then the scene where the Doctor got very upset with Omo, and I told you maybe about 24, 48 hours ago, Dave, that there was that backstory up online where you could read the story of how he helped Omo as a boy put out the fire, which we got the recap of at the start of this episode. And then he was just, it seemed almost out of nowhere, I'm going to have to rewatch it, he was very angry with Omo, and like, you've betrayed me, or I'm really, really upset with you, and don't come near me again. There were times they were just going, what the hell is going on? I've completely lost the train of this episode.
Yeah, so I got the intent of the Barber, the Celestial Barber, or whatever you want to call him, the Galactic Barber. Sorry, I thought I did, in that it felt like a very Greek story of one man's quest or one man's love to save the maiden or whatever, meant that he had to, or be willing to sacrifice Olympus to achieve his mission. I sort of got that in a storytelling perspective.
Right, yep.
I will say, I've mentioned a couple of times that although the sound mixing this year hasn't been quite as bad as last year, this was a pretty bad example. And between the background music, the sound, and just a lot of very deep voices in this, there were bits of dialogue that were a little bit impenetrable, and I think that did hurt because a lot of the explanation, I think, wasn't always quite as clear.
And possibly accents.
Yeah, I mean, they're accents that we're unfamiliar with,
Yeah.
and they're very deep voices, and they're sort of against a quite full and rich music and soundscape, and the mix just for Doctor Who for a couple of years now, as I've said, just seems really, really wacky, and so there were moments where I think I perhaps couldn't quite get every word of the dialogue that maybe I needed to.
Oh, I know of multiple podcasts that have mentioned they watch this with subtitles. Not this particular episode, but in the past, they watch episodes with subtitles just so they can tell what's being said.
Yes, and I think that this was a very good example of something that was very talky. It was a very, very talky episode with very long monologues about intentions and desires. And if you can't always make out the monologue in a monologue-heavy story, that perhaps does mean that there are some explanations and expositions that aren't perhaps as clear on the first watch as they could be. But all that said, I did manage to join the dots enough, because this did feel like a very traditional story, whether it's Greek or African or Aboriginal or Mexican, whatever ancient culture you have, that story of the hero who, for very, very human reasons, needs to defy the gods. I felt that in this story, and so I got the beats.
Okay, yeah, and even just in talking here, I'm starting to put more things together in my head. Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Now, Rob, you mentioned it before, the giant spider.
Yes.
I'm not really quite sure what that was all about. And yes, shout out, as you say, to Mike Socker, who gave us a bit of the cultural background of what that spider was about, which was helpful, because without knowing that, I would have been completely baffled by it. And I did have flashbacks to a couple of things. The main one was, if ever you want 20 minutes of entertainment, go on YouTube and Google Kevin Smith's Superman Lives, where he does a 20-minute story about his involvement with basically writing and then being ditched from the Superman Lives movie project. But all the way through, there's this theme of this wacky producer who's like, I want lots of things. I don't want him in that suit. I don't want him flying. And in the last act, he's got to fight a giant spider. Right. And just, how wacky that was. And then Kevin Smith, sort of after he'd been done for the project, going to see the next movie that this producer made, which was Wild Wild West, and going, well, this is a load of nonsense. And then suddenly in the third act, for no apparent reason, there's a giant spider. So I had that vibes there of like, just, I don't know why there's a spider, but maybe John Peters is the producer on this, because it seems a bit bizarre to me. I don't quite know what plot function it has. It also felt very Stephen King's It. It sort of felt very... because we need to somehow manifest the danger in a real way, let's just make it a spider. Now, because of what Mike Salko has said, I know that there's a cultural reason why the spider comes in, but I've got to say, even knowing that, and certainly had I not known that, it was just like, and suddenly there's a giant bloody spider.
And it's interesting, because when the Barber was initially trying to bullshit them and said, I've been Anansi, I've been Dionysus, I've been whatever, Asgardian. Loki, that's it, thank you. Anansi was just one of those, and it seemed to be on the same tier as all those others. So why the Anansi legend sort of took precedence then with the manifestation of where the barber shop was sitting on the back of a spider. I guess visually it was more interesting. I guess it is the African tale out of all those different myths and legends. But yeah, it was just another one of those moments where I'm like, what now?
Yeah, and I can sort of see that they were maybe leaning a little bit into that whole sort of chariot of the gods, alien thing influences Earth culture and religion. Yeah, okay, I get that. It was just a bit, it was just a bit like, why is there a spider? Yeah. And look, while we're talking about the African setting of this story, I want to say up front that I'm going to engage with what I'm about to say in good faith. I appreciate the show's efforts to explore new cultural ground and highlight diverse experiences, and I don't want to question that at all in what I'm about to say. But the character of the Doctor, I found it a bit jarring that the Doctor is set up here to feel so at home in Lagos. Traditionally, the Doctor has always been portrayed as an outsider, no matter where he, I guess, or she lands. And regardless of appearance, cultural context, he's usually reminded, sometimes humorously, sometimes dramatically, that he isn't one of us, So to see Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor so embraced in Lagos and being, I'm deeply connected to this place, seemed like a bit of a departure
from that theme, which has been very long running in the series of the Doctor being alien. And of course, I get that Ncuti brings African heritage to the role. He's not from Lagos, his family, but, from Africa in general. And there's value in exploring that. But it did make me wonder, Dave, to cut to the chase, whether we were seeing the character written here as the Doctor, or more Ncuti Gatwa, and it being shaped more by the actor's identity than the character's actual history. Am I making sense here? Because it just gave me pause when they were doing that whole spiel.
No, you're making sense. I don't necessarily agree, but I certainly understand where you're coming from, and I did go through a similar thought process of is this sort of being, again, not sort of forced into it, but has this been earned? And that's something we can come back to. I think that we've always seen that different incarnations of the Doctor have found places where they feel at home. Pertwee was sort of very home in London. In the Virgin books, the Seventh Doctor has a little place, I can't remember the address, but he has this place that he sort of goes back to, and there are places where the Doctor has always said that he feels at home. And I was kind of relaxed as I went through that thought process to go, okay, and Lagos is a place where this Doctor feels at home. It was a bit sort of, oh, by the way, I've been here a lot and I feel very at home now. And it's like, well, okay, I guess there's a Big Finish box sitting there somewhere.
Well, I was just trying to think of a bigger picture stuff. Ncuti regenerates at some stage. Some say at the end of this season. Does he regenerate into a white man or a white woman or an Asian man, whatever it might be? Does that mean when he wants to go back to Lagos, because he has friends here, he's great mates with Omo, does he feel less connected next time he sees Omo if he's a white guy?
That's a really interesting question, and it's one that I think the show, written well, could and should explore. It's very Jadzia Dax, the whole sort of concept of, and I'm going to Deep Space Nine there, my favourite Star Trek. But that part of the character of Jadzia Dax is that she's a trill and she moves from body to body and host to host. As the host dies, the symbiont moves to different bodies, and that thing of, well, the last time I met you, I was a man, and now I'm a woman, and all that sort of thing. And so those things often would pop up in Deep Space Nine. She'd meet an ancient Klingon and be, the last time you met me, I was a man, now I'm a woman. And I think, that's something that could be explored. I think, having cast the first black man to play the Doctor, it would be very strange if they didn't explore that in some ways. And I think it's wise that they didn't do it all that much, other than the oblique reference. I mean, let's face it, so obliquely missed it the first time, Rob, in
Dot and Bubble.
Other than an oblique reference there, it hasn't really been explored all that much in his first season, which I think was wise to make sure he's defined as the Doctor, not the Black Doctor. But I do think that in his second season, if they completely ignore the fact that this was the first Black Doctor, in fact, the first Doctor of any multicultural ethnicity at all, that would have been strange. And we have had that reference to it in the segregation speech a couple of episodes ago. We've had a reference to it now. I think that it was done well. It wasn't an RTD sledgehammer thing. It was just a nice bit of, okay, we are reflecting on how the Doctor being back black for the first time is affecting his interactions with humanity, and that reflects on us, and it reflects on the world, and because of this, he doesn't feel as comfortable in a 1970s London club as the third Doctor did, but he feels happy in a side street Barber in Lagos. I got there. I did go through the same sort of thought process as you, Rob, but I ended in a different place.
Yeah, because again, I agree with all of that, and I think we should explore new cultural ground. We should hight diverse experiences, all of that stuff. Absolutely agree. And I'm glad they did it.
I said, Rob, that was full of some really interesting ideas, and the relationship between stories and gods and culture and energy and power was an interesting one to explore. I think it occasionally became a little bit too metaphysical for what should be a fast-paced, exciting adventure TV show. And then you sort of get some very trite lines like, what else is a story? And I've gone, well, that's just a load of wank, isn't it? What else is a story but a giant heart inside it? Well, no, that probably sounded very profound when you wrote it, but said out loud, I thought it just sounded a bit of a wank.
When authors start writing about the importance of stories or the importance of authors, and it's just a real fig jam sort of moment.
Yeah.
I really roll my eyes, not just with this episode, but remember the Red Dwarf series where it all came down to the actual writer of Red Dwarf was writing Red Dwarf on Red Dwarf, and it was like, oh, no, just stop. I really dislike when writers write about how important writing is. It really gives me the shits.
Yeah, even JMS would occasionally lean into that in Babylon 5, particularly the later series, about all the power of this most wonderful, perfectly written prose. And you go, okay, we know you wrote that, JMS, so, writing about how wonderful this work is that you've written is yes, get your hand off it. The other issue with that is that, again, it went into some very metaphysical and philosophical stuff about the need for gods and stories. And I thought, given that RTD is a very atheistic person, and that his atheism is often cut through Doctor Who, and indeed, Doctor Who has been, I think since the 60s, a very, at least agnostic, if not atheistic, show. It is all about, science, Miss Grant, and Logar is everywhere, but he's also a dude in a spacesuit. And, the Mara is not a god, the Mara is, etc., etc. I think it was interesting for a show that is like that, and particularly one run by RTD, to start to go into this, well, we need gods. And I just am not sure if what RTD's conception of a god is gels with perhaps a wider perception of a god, which is a deity in a religious setting.
Yeah, and again, it's a topic that I need to really sit back and think on.
Yeah, look, of all
like
the ones...
a lot of this.
Yeah, of all the ones that we've done hot takes for this year, this is the one that most needs a second viewing. I think last week's needs a second conversation. The more I thought about last week's episode, the more I thought, and what about this? And what about this point someone's raised? And what about that? And the whole thing just really sort of unravelled even further. But I don't feel the need to watch it again. It was just that as I thought about it more came in. But this one, I spent the first 20 minutes going, what's going on here? Who are these people? What is this someone from the Pantheon? Is it an alien? Is it the land of fiction? Is it the gods of Ragnarok? I'll sort of go through all of that and trying to piece it all together. I think it's going to be interesting going back and knowing who the Barber is, watching it again and watching it all in that context and seeing how those threads come together and how those ideas come together. Because the ideas were deep. The strength of this was the thoughtful ideas.
Yeah. Oh, look, I was trying to piece it together logistically. Like, these guys have been missing for 6 months, so they've been in this place for 6 months. And I was thinking, but is time passing differently in here? Because what are they going to eat? Where do they have a shower? And then the lady comes in and she's brought them food. I'm like, oh, that answers that question. They might literally have been here for 6 months in real time. Time passes in here the same as it's passed on the outside, so they do need to eat. Well then, where do they go for a shower? Where do they have a poo? All of that stuff. I started going down those because I try and understand a story in its totality and what the author's trying to say, and I'm sure this makes absolute sense in the author's mind, but for mine, I'm going to have to watch it another time or two, I think, to get there.
I think that's fair. I think that the conception is stronger than the execution. I don't think that's an unfair criticism of it. I think we need to give more thought to that conception.
Very fair.
And yes, I did genuinely wonder if that thing that they discovered that was the heart inside the brain, inside the whatever, was going to turn out to be the master of the land of fiction thing.
Right. Shall we go to the sports desk?
Let's go Robert and the Colonel off to the sports desk. Put the green blazer on.
Now, Dave, here we are at the sports desk where we do our word of the week, play of the week, foul of the week, MVP of the week. Your word of the week was theatre, I believe?
It was, yes.
Tell us about that.
I felt that this was like watching a sort of 2-3-handed play in the theatre. It was lots of very good actors and one very good actress, or two very good actresses actually, because Farada Suthu was in this eventually. So yes, it was a very good cast, giving some very good dialogue, but it really did feel like a theatre play where you stand there and somebody gives a long monologue explaining the history and the feelings of the romance, and then somebody replies with a long monologue. And that works very, very well if you're in a small sort of 200-seat theatre with a nice little stage, a spotlight, some sparse set, and it's all about the dialogue and the ideas. Does it work for a Saturday afternoon space-time adventure? Not sure. And I think the fault of this was that it did feel like a piece of theatre more than it felt like a piece of adventure television.
Well, would it interest you to know that Inua Ellams is a playwright, and I believe, and don't crucify me, dear listeners, if this is wrong, I believe this is his first television.
That would not shock me at all. And yeah, okay, okay.
So he's coming from that tradition, yeah.
Yeah, I could believe that, absolutely. There you go.
All right, my word of the week was ghost, as in ghost light, because this is genuinely, dear listener, the first episode of Doctor Who since Ghostlight where I've come away from it thinking, I didn't quite grasp that, I didn't quite get it, I need to rewatch it, I don't know quite what I think of it, it could be genius or it could just be a bit average, I don't know.
Maybe you need to wait for the Target novel, Rob.
Yeah. Maybe I do.
Yeah, no, I think that's quite reflective. I think I grasped the through line of this slightly better than you did. It could be, however, that I just started to make up my own through line because I couldn't understand it. Maybe it wasn't there. I don't know. But yes, this has got some big conceptual concepts. Not sure about the execution.
Yeah, and again, I got all the ingredients, but it's that through line that's important. I got that he used to be a human. I got that he developed the Nexus. I got that it was doing this. I got what he wanted to do. But how it all quite fitted together and why, I don't know.
And what was the spider?
And what was the spider? I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I'll continue us on with Play of the Week. This is actually interesting because it ties into your word of the week. I think the premise of telling this set in a shop was actually quite good because it sort of contained all the action and contained the story, because I think the story did have a lot of ambition, and I think by just limiting it to this area, I think it helped concentrate things. Now, did it quite work for me on the first viewing? Well, obviously no, it bloody didn't because of everything I've said, but on future viewings, I think that actually might help, rather than it going all over the place. So I actually liked how they contained this, Dave.
Okay, that makes sense.
How about your play of the week?
Related. My play of the week was the setting full stop. I think using Lagos was a really wonderful and interesting and different sort of thing. And it had me reflecting that Africa really is the continent that Western literature has forgotten in many ways, and Doctor Who, I think, can be included in that. And certainly, if you excise ancient Egypt out of Africa, and because so much of the history of ancient Egypt has been co-opted by the Christian Bible and co-opted by Roman history and all that sort of thing,
and the Greeks, and
yeah. So you take ancient Egypt out of Africa, particularly, and it's very rare to set any piece of Western television like this in Africa. Doctor Who really hasn't done it much, if at all, outside of Africa, and I just think that was a really wonderful, different thing. We can go anywhere in time and space, but we don't really go to Africa all that much. We like to go to Europe, we go to Britain, obviously, we go to America, we occasionally go to Asia. We've stopped by Australia, we've stopped by the Middle East, but yeah, this feels like a neglected setting, and I think that was really good to see it done.
All right, take us through to the foul of the week for you.
My foul of the week was just another iteration of gods, and particularly just sort of lame middle order gods who could be very easily destroyed. I think that the whole pantheon concept last year and this year has just kind of cheapened this idea of what a god is. A god's now just sort of a slightly cool space being that is actually pretty easily defeated, and that a crazy barber with a spider can just take the whole lot out. I just sort of I'm kind of just over this sort of second-rate space god concept, and I think that was a shame to bring into an otherwise quite thoughtful episode.
Yeah, and even at the end where it's like, oh, a mortal giving advice to a god? If that was maybe the first god we'd had in Doctor Who in a long, long time, that might have been a really cool moment, but it's like, yeah, gods pop up every other week, so Belinda saying something slightly intelligent and the god reacting in that way, yeah, okay.
And how immortal are these gods if, everybody can just keep wiping them out all the time?
Yeah, exactly right. My foul of the week, Dave, ties into what I was talking about in my play of the week, this being such an ambitious piece. My foul is that it was ambitious, because even though we confined the action to that barbershop on the whole, I was still, as people can tell from this hot take, was still confused as to the actual through line. And even when things were being explained like this is this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that now, I was still thinking, why? How does it all fit? What are we doing? Why is the Doctor angry with this guy who he's been great mates with? I haven't actually seen anything for him to be so angry with this guy about. What's happening now? What day of the week it is? Where's my medication? So I think the ambition of it just slightly ran away with it. And maybe I'll take that all back when I watch it again. I don't know.
Yep, I understand all of that. And your player of the week?
This was really hard, but I'm going to give it to the costume department, because I think the costuming of this looked very good, very authentic. Africa is a very colourful place, much like India as well. A lot of the local clothing and the buildings and such are painted very colourfully or dyed very colourfully. That was just came through in bucket loads. And you're just looking at it thinking, this looks really sumptuous. These costumes look really cool. I like how this looks. The sets still look like Doctor Who sets, when they're inside. I mean, we talk about Disney money. The interior sets don't have a patch on something like Andor or something being made on Disney. But I digress. Yeah, it was the costuming for me, Dave.
Yeah, look, I think that's actually just a different take on my play of the week in the use of the setting, so that's that's very fair. My play of the week I'm giving to the gentleman who played the Space Barber. Now, IMDb hasn't actually updated for this episode at time of recording, so I haven't got his name, unfortunately.
So the Barber, Dave, was played by Arian Bakari. I've got the BBC website up.
Oh, there you go. Well, look, I think he gave a very strong performance that anchored a lot of the ideas together and gave the concept some credibility. So, yeah, player of the week for me. Rob, we've got to the end of the episode. Nobody's mentioned the Fugitive Doctor.
I was about to, Dave.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, Jo Barton pops up, the Ruth Doctor, as some people call her. I liked her line, and I even made a note of it, that she said that, look, I'm busy in another story, and it might be finished one day, which I thought was a very meta sort of way of saying, Chibnall's brought me into this, but we've never actually done anything with me or with my character, and maybe we'll do something one day. I don't know. I thought that was quite clever, actually.
Yeah, look, it was a nice surprise moment. I think a lot of fans will be very excited to see her again, because she's a very popular character. I thought it was a bit cheap myself, but hey, whatever, cool, fine.
What about all the flashbacks to the other Doctors then on telly?
Oh, yeah, that was nice.
That was okay? In the same vein as the Ruth Doctor showing up?
Slightly more explicable, but yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Dave, next week is the Interstellar Song Contest. The Doctor's quest to get Belinda back home to Earth leads to a space station hosting the famous song contest. But a harmless night of fun soon becomes a battle to survive.
Oh, there you go.
You don't seem overwhelmed, not underwhelmed. Are you just whelmed?
I am doing everything I can to approach this episode with an open mind. But as somebody who is not known for his particularly camp tastes and can't stand the Eurovision Song Contest, it's very hard for me to do that. I will do my best, dear listeners. But I think I'm going to go watch Andor episode 9 now.
Ooh, you'll love it.
I loved 8. Oh my God, 8 was a good.
Save your thoughts for the alternate galaxies.
I will, but my God, it was a good episode.
It was a good episode, yes.
Yes. Oh, a score, Rob, a score.
Oh, a score. Yeah, look, again, I sort of prefaced this earlier. I really don't know where to place it. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I think it's better than Robot Revolution. I think it's under last week's, and I think it's definitely under Lux, and the other one I liked, whatever one that was this season. So, but if I watch it again, could it go to the top of the list? No, it probably won't. Oh, I'm sticking with 7 out of 10, Dave.
I've sort of done the same cowardly thing you have and just sort of given it a B, not really willing to put my mast in the ground one way or the other at this stage.
I can't because I don't fully get it yet.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good going on. I don't think it was as exciting as it could have been. I wasn't, thrilled by this one, but neither was I hating it. So yeah, look, it's a nice, safe B for now. And my final note is I don't know what the internet has done to RTD, but once again we had a little sort of writer's monologue about the evils of the World Wide Web and trolls. It's like, gee, you know what, RTD? If you hate the internet so much, get offline. It's not hard, dude. Just get offline. Don't write an entire season about how much you hate people online. Just get offline.
Yeah, I don't think that was an Inua Ellam's line. I think RTD might have shoehorned that one in.
Yeah, it really felt shoehorned.
Ooh, he's got a spider, and spiders do webs, and there's the World Wide Web. Oh, writes itself,
Yes, trolls. I hate trolls. They're like incels and hashtag people and, just dude, you'll be a lot happier if you just turn the internet off.
Exactly right. But until next week, I've been Rob.
I've been Dave.
We'll see you again on the Doctor Who show. Bye-bye.
And there might be another giant spider.
Oh, no!